What do you think? What do you see the power that organizations have to kind of help support their people?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I love your notion of courage, because I think it's so critical to not only have courage, but also to have this sense of humility. Because nobody, no matter what organization they're leading, no one at this very moment knows what tomorrow's going to bring. This pandemic is unpredictable. The social and systemic racial unrest is unpredictable. Like, no one can predict what tomorrow or next week or next month is going to bring. And so as a leader, that's a challenge. But if you have courage and humility to understand that I don't have all the answers, but I'm going to be okay saying that and sharing with my team that I don't have all the answers, I think that's a powerful combination.
Welcome back to The Thermostat with Jason Barger. If you're currently on a commute, a walk, or just a micro break in your day, glad you're making time to step back, to think, and to reflect on the next steps on your journey. I've never been more convinced. The best leaders and team cultures in the world are the ones that make time to step back and calibrate their thermostat. I hope today's conversation leaves you feeling grounded and inspired. Now let's dive into today's topic to engage our minds and hearts in order to authentically lead and create compelling cultures wherever we are in the world. All right. Hello, everyone. It's Jason, and welcome back to the Thermostat podcast. If your head has been buried in the sand sometime or somewhere lately, then you've probably, if it's been buried, then maybe you haven't noticed the division, the disconnection, the disengagement, and the conflict that certainly has been existing in the world today as we continue to try to figure out how to navigate our way through 2020. I am more convinced than ever of this, that if you didn't think developing people and authentic leadership in the world and creating compelling cultures that actually care for people and connect people rather than divide people, if you didn't think that was important before 2020, then I think that you probably are realizing how critical that is, not only for your team and your organization, but ultimately for our world right now. So thanks to everybody out there who's listening, and thank you for everybody out there who, of course, continues to subscribe and listen to the podcast, rate the podcast, share it. All those ways, of course, help amplify this out further into the world. And for that, I'm so very grateful to just try to be a positive voice out there in the world in the midst of a lot of negativity and a lot of noise. So I am very excited to invite my guest for today into this chat in just a minute. Doug Ulman is the president and CEO of Pelotonia. If you haven't checked out Pelotonia, go to pelotonia.org and learn more about this amazing organization, which was established in 2008 with the objective to fund life-saving cancer research, and is a rapidly growing nonprofit. Doug is a 3-time cancer survivor himself, and also a globally recognized cancer advocate. He's been celebrated as one of the top 50 nonprofit executives across the country, which is an amazing honor and a wonderful thing. I know him as a caring and compassionate leader, and every time I get a chance to talk to Doug, I just enjoy our conversation. So welcome into the podcast, Doug.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, man. Great to see you, and then also to connect with you. You and I have had a few phone calls, especially over the last year, and certainly as the pandemic has picked up, and I always appreciate a chance to connect with you and have another maybe positive voice on the other end of the line to help pick me up.
The feeling is mutual. I think so many of the things that you've been advocating for a long time are more critical today than they've ever been. So it's awesome to be here and chat about all that and more.
Yeah, man. Well, thanks for being here. So the first place I want to start is, 3-time cancer survivor. So let's not fly right past that, because I just want to sit with that for a second. Gratefully, you've moved through those diagnoses, and I'm wondering, in the midst of a year that has been so uncertain and dealing with change and new information that comes. I wonder what your reflections are today. I'm sure you've had reflections over the years, many about those diagnoses and dealing with that. But with the world that we're in right now, what have you learned? How does it help you handle uncertainty and in that kind of the world we're in of the unknown? What reflections do you have, at least today?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think anytime you deal with a life-threatening health issue like cancer or a diagnosis of that sort, you learn a ton. And for me, I was diagnosed initially at 19 years old. So it was in a period of time when I thought I was invincible, thought I didn't need the help of anybody else. I was becoming independent. And you quickly realize that you have to rely on so many other people around you in order to not only get great medical care, but in order to emerge even healthier than maybe you were previously. And I think there are a lot of similarities, when we're challenged, when we deal with overwhelming and sometimes surprising situations, how we react to that is important. I think the one thing I've reflected on recently is that, when you're diagnosed with cancer, as I said, you have to rely on others, right? You've got friends, family, nurses, physicians. And I think in this pandemic that we're living in, we all have come to the realization, or should come to the realization, that there's an interdependency where what I do impacts you, what you do impacts me, and we need each other.
Yeah.
And that idea that it takes a village or a community to survive a cancer diagnosis, well, it takes a community to rally to overcome most significant challenges. We don't do this on our own. We do this together. And, that's one of the lessons I learned a long time ago through both cancer as well as, some experiences in sports, the idea of teams and how you can collaborate to achieve things that none of us can do on our own. And I think it resonates today more than ever, potentially.
Yeah, no doubt. Nowadays, unfortunately, everybody knows someone who's been impacted by cancer. That's I've lost my mother. My uncle, many different family members and friends that I know, of course, and certainly anybody out there listening knows that it'd be rare to not know somebody that has been impacted by cancer. And so in the world that we're in today, that building of community, and I think that resonates, at least with me, that in the world that we're living in today, even outside of this talk about cancer, is that to realize that we are dependent on one another, and that my behaviors impact your behaviors and your behaviors impact my behaviors. And certainly we're both come from that kind of team and sports background. So to be able to think of it that way is really powerful. For anybody out there who doesn't know of Pelotonia, or is coming to this, listening to this, wondering what it is, I want to just give a little scale and scope to it too. Like how much money has been raised in the time for cancer research?
Yeah, so this community has been so generous, not just in Central Ohio, but across the state and across the country, and even now around the world. And they have generated more than $215 million, 100% of which is invested directly into groundbreaking, life-saving cancer research. And we're humbled by the generosity of so many people. And we're also just getting started. And we're excited about what's ahead because, again, if you bring enough people together, we can solve any challenge. And cancer is one of the most daunting and overwhelming challenges that we all face as a society. But the breakthroughs are there and the opportunities are there. And that's what we're going to stay focused on.
Yeah, and I think what you and your team and everybody associated, the Pelotonia community, I think what is so inspiring and awesome about it is really it's an image for actually, again, not just cancer research, although 215 million, like that's amazing work and amazing stuff that's been done by so many different people. But it's such a great image for the world that we're in right now, that a community of people coming together and saying, let's all seek solutions in positive ways and try to figure out how do we bring people together rather than divide people. I think about the uncertainties, again, that we're all experiencing in 2020. So you got a global pandemic, you got economic uncertainties, you got political uncertainties and certainly division there. You've got Black Lives Matter, You've got kids schooling, and is it hybrid, or you and I were just talking about this, online or hybrid, or what do we do with our kids? What do you think is being revealed to us about dealing with uncertainty and kind of leading ourselves, starting with leading ourselves, but then also realizing that we have a chance to influence and lead others as well?
Yeah, look, uncertainty is hard, period. And the way I've been describing this in conversation recently is that it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter what your life situation is. The uncertainty that we're all enduring right now is overwhelming. And it can be anxiety producing and stress producing. And that's not a good place for anyone to be in personally. It's not a good place to make decisions from. It's not a good place to lead from. And so the number one thing is, as leaders, we have to take care of ourselves. And that sounds so selfish, but it's true. You can't lead from a position of weakness. You can't lead if you don't feel well, if you aren't at sort of operating at your peak. And so I think that's something that oftentimes gets taken for granted. And people say, oh, no, I'm going to stay up late tonight because I got to keep doing. Well, if you do that over and over again, you actually won't be able to lead through a time of uncertainty. I think, deep down, I believe that human beings are so good-natured and they want what's best for those around them. However, I think sometimes in uncertain times, you can prioritize the wrong thing.
Yep.
And you can forget about those outside of your four walls. And you can say, gosh, I got to really focus on my family or my work or my job. And that is short-sighted, because at the end of the day, none of us get the chance to move forward unless everybody moves forward together. And that's just a tenet of my sort of values and beliefs that my parents instilled in me at a young age. And I just always have to remind myself of that. This isn't about getting ahead of somebody else right now. This is about making sure that everybody has the opportunity to move forward. And frankly, when this pandemic started, some of the greatest examples of human kindness were all around us. And we saw glimpses of what is possible. People providing food at the food bank, people donating to, clothing organizations or shelters, or, everybody saying, what can I do to help those less fortunate? And as time has passed and the fatigue has set in, I think it's sort of evaporated in some way. And we've got to get back to that collective notion that if we all do our part, whatever, quote, our part is, we can emerge from this in a much better place as a society and as a community.
Yeah, absolutely. I think some of the language, at least I've been giving to this with many teams and organizations, is this idea that courage is being able to sit in ambiguity. That true courage is when we don't have things figured out. We don't know what the right next move is, per se. There's a lot of things that are out of our control. In the midst of that uncertainty and ambiguity, true courage is being able to sit in that space and to take a step back and to realize, okay, hold on, let's be courageous in this moment and then figure out what is within our control. And I know you and I have talked about this before, that the image also that I've shared on this podcast before is that I think in March, April, May, June, many individuals, but certainly families and teams and organizations, leaders, I think, took the mindset or thought as this pandemic began that we came out of the gates hot and everybody thought this would be behind us by the time we got to 4th of July. And so this sprint began. But I think then people realized, oh, geez, we're in the midst of a marathon and not a sprint. And so this, how do we care for ourselves as leaders? And again, what I've thought about in that marathon is we've got to find ways to breathe oxygen into ourselves so that we're even able to run, right? Or ride the bike in your case. But breathe oxygen into ourselves. And so many teams and organizations in the midst of the global pandemic, it has been, when you're working remotely, there really is no start or end to the workday. And so we can kind of work all the time, and yet we've had to be reminded we're in a marathon. And so to keep ourselves mentally sane, we got to breathe oxygen into ourselves and find ways to stay motivated and inspired and healthy. And then also learn how to breathe oxygen into the people around us. So from a organizational standpoint, I talk about this proactively shaping culture, and thermostat cultures being the ones that have clarity around not just what we do, but what is the culture that we're proactively setting together. I'm wondering, I think about this in the pandemic that, our places of work are where so many humans right now in the world spend 8, 10, maybe 12 hours a day. And so they have these tremendous opportunities, these spaces to help breathe oxygen into people while they're dealing with all the stuff we've just named. What are you seeing? What temperature is being set, in your organization, and or what do you think? What do you see the power that organizations have to kind of help support their people?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I love your notion of courage, because I think it's so critical to not only have courage, but also to have this sense of humility. Because nobody, no matter what organization they're leading, no one at this very moment knows what tomorrow's going to bring. This pandemic is unpredictable. The social and systemic racial unrest is unpredictable. Like, no one can predict what tomorrow or next week or next month is going to bring. And so as a leader, that's a challenge. But if you have courage and humility to understand that I don't have all the answers, but I'm going to be okay saying that and sharing with my team that I don't have all the answers, I think that's a powerful combination.
Hello, everybody. Many of you have heard me talking about the upcoming exciting virtual event on November 6th, Thermostat Cultures Live, and we are just about 1 week away, November 6th, 2020, for Thermostat Cultures Live. This year, a virtual event. You know that I've been talking about this. There's never been a time in the world where it's been more important for us to be talking about what does authentic leadership in the world really look like, and how do we develop our minds and hearts to help create the compelling cultures that we need. For the last few years, this has been an in-person gathering of leaders from across industries, and have joined me and other thought leaders from around the globe for this Thermostat Cultures Live event. And this year we're going to be online virtually. In years past, I've had amazing people like Howard Behar, former president of Starbucks, Jenny Britton Bauer, founder of Jenny's Ice Cream, Shane Battier, NBA legend, Jessica Jackley, one of the co-founders of Kiva.org, Cameron Mitchell from Cameron Mitchell Restaurants, Greg Oden, former NBA #1 draft pick, and many, many, many more. It's been a powerful, inspiring, action-oriented, and solutions-focused experience that has impacted teams and organizations near and far. And so this year, I hope you'll visit thermostatcultureslive.com. And this year, the virtual event is going to be powerful, interactive, this virtual experience that will reach further and impact more individuals and organizations. I invite you to experience it as an individual or as an entire team or company. I know many teams and companies that are going to be experiencing it virtually together and then joining together to help carry these conversations and learnings into their culture. So please visit thermostatcultureslive.com to register you and your team, and also see the other great voices that will be joining me this year. And I hope you'll join me in setting the temperature for authentic leadership and compelling culture in the world today and in our organizations. thermostatcultureslive.com.
I think
I love that, by the way. I don't want to interrupt you, but just yesterday with a senior leadership team of the company, I said those almost exact words to them, is as you could see them chasing for this, that we were supposed to have the answers and be able to tell our people that. And I said that very same thing, that leadership isn't about having all the answers. In fact, it's about being able to be humble enough to say, you know what, I don't know.
Yeah.
And so I don't know exactly what we're going to do next, but I want to focus on how we're going to together move.
Yeah. And I think, to your point of sort of breathing oxygen, when you say, I don't know, but here's the direction, or here are the decisions we're making, and here's why, it actually allows your team to breathe oxygen.
Yeah.
Because the pressure and stress that they're feeling every day, they're dealing with all of this and more. And it gives them the chance to breathe, which is so critical. I think for us, work from home has been a blessing because we can do it. And that's not something we take for granted. but it's also ebbed and flowed, right? There was so much efficiency at first, and then it sort of waned a bit, and people got tired of the Zoom culture, and then we decided to do something. We decided to close our office for a week in August, and we told everybody, you cannot work, and you got to just get outside and not work. And we're going to do it again next month. And the idea is that you have to have breaks. I mean, you have to stop and say,
yep,
you can't work from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. in your home all day. It's not healthy. And at the end of the day, people will burn out. They won't get enough oxygen. And frankly, personally, I've done that. And I've experienced it over the last few months,
yep,
where I've stressed myself to a point of realizing that this can't go on. It can't last. And as you were talking earlier, you know, the book that I read every single year is called Man's Search for Meaning.
Yeah.
And it's something that I started doing in college. And the reason I read it is because the message of what Frankl talks about from his horrific experience was this idea that some people during World War II died of a broken heart. They died of false hope because they thought, I'm going to be out of here by X date. And that date came and went. And then they thought, I'm going to be out of here by, and it came and went. And so to your point of like, oh, we thought we were going to be done with this July 4th. We may not be done with this next July 4th.
That's right.
You know, and so having the constant ability to breathe and to live with uncertainty, with courage and humility, it may be months, it may be years of a new normal or the next normal. And the quicker we can sort of get to that place, the better. It's almost like the equivalent in cancer. When you're diagnosed with cancer, almost everybody for a period of time, whether it's a minute, an hour, a week, or a year, says, why me? And I always tell people, because I went through it, the quicker you get past the why me, the better, because there's not going to be an answer. And I think with this pandemic, it's the same. It's like, it doesn't matter where it started. It doesn't matter who did this or didn't do that. Like at this very moment, we have decisions to make for today, tomorrow, and going forward. And I think if we approach these challenges in sort of an optimistic way, but also with a realistic view, it's probably the only way to manage through.
Absolutely. I love what you said too about, and I love what you're doing with your team of encouraging them, saying, get out of the office and actually in the midst of a time right now where we can always be working and really never disconnect, is to take rest. I did another podcast not too long ago where I talked about that very idea. Everybody knows that the research that Malcolm Gladwell made famous, you know, the 10,000 hours of deliberate practice to become an expert at something, with amazing research that, you know, he didn't do, but a study that he has made famous. But one of the elements of that exact same study that doesn't get talked about is in that very same study of saying that 10,000 hours of deliberate practice to become an expert. It also called on them to have 12,500 hours of deliberate rest. And yet that's the part that we don't talk about, is we talk about the 10,000 hours of deliberate practice because in our culture, again, we want to grind, we want to know, we want to become an expert at something. But yet the studies reveal that the people that also were able to deliberately rest their mind and their bodies and their hearts actually were more effective in the long run.
Yeah, it's fascinating because I didn't know that part of it, and it makes total sense. It makes total sense. But in some way, I'm sure at some point somebody decided that that's a sign of weakness. Yeah. And let's not talk about that piece. Let's talk about the driving, hard charging, 10,000 hours piece. And that's fascinating.
Yeah. I thought it was amazing. I did a whole podcast about it because I think that that's just a piece of that gets missed. And yet I know I'm a better everything when I take, Bill Gates has made the famous kind of think weeks. I'm pretty religious about my times during the year where I get away for kind of my own little mini sabbaticals and writing and reading and thinking and all that. And I just know that my own practice of deliberate rest throughout a year, I'm better at everything because of it. Yeah. Better husband, better dad, better, with the clients that I serve, so absolutely. Huge believer in that. Hey,
it makes me think of one quick thing. So I've talked about this in the past, but I had the the privilege of playing for this incredible high school soccer coach. And he was like a legend. And at the time, I didn't appreciate all the lessons I learned from him.
Of course. Yeah.
But one of the things he used to say all the time, I mean, he would yell it all the time from the sidelines. He would say, walk when you can, run when you must. And I use it in a lot of my presentations. And what he meant was, in soccer, there's no timeouts, right? So the ball is constantly moving. You're constantly, in the play or in the flow of the game. And he would say, you have to walk when you can, because you have to conserve the energy to run when you must. And
I love that.
You won't be able to sprint when you need to. And I never appreciated it when I was in high school, obviously, but now it makes so much sense in life. If you don't walk when you can, you will not be able to run when you must.
Oh, I love that. I will be citing you and your coach and sharing that, because that's fantastic. Another story that I love of yours that I think you shared with me, I think on one of our last calls that we did together, was the Dan Rather story. And I think especially for the times that we are in, and again, did another podcast about this idea of us being, that we live in this kind of criticulous culture, that everybody's a critic and everybody kind of is easy to sit back or on social media or somewhere and kind of lob criticisms on things that aren't working. And so in our communities and in our schools and our businesses, and certainly then with all these social issues, tell the Dan Rather story, because I think that is so poignant for where we're in right now.
Yeah, it's great. You have a great memory. It's a powerful story that I will never forget. And I think about it all the time. In recent days, just watching the political discourse, it comes to my mind all the time. I was on an airplane flying from Austin to New York, and there was an empty seat next to me, and it was the last person to get on the plane. And I heard this voice coming down the aisle, and I looked up, and it was Dan Rather, and he was coming to sit next to me. And I was sort of in shock and in awe. This was many, many years ago. And for the entire flight, he wanted to chat. And it was, 3-hour plus flight, and he was talking, and I had my computer out, and he thought, I think, that I was working or trying to work in the midst of our conversation. But what I was doing is taking notes, because I didn't want to miss anything that he was saying.
I love it.
And long story short, we talked about the political landscape at the time and things that were going on in the world. And he made this comment that he said, look, when I was trained to be a journalist, I was trained to be skeptical. And he said, not cynical. And he said, there's a huge difference. And he said, in this day and age, we're seeing so many people who approach that life as cynics. And they want to bring somebody down, or they want to ask because they want a certain answer. And he said, there's a huge difference. When you're skeptical, you ask because you want to understand the thinking, the thought process, and why something is happening. When you're cynical, you actually don't believe what they're saying. And so you want to make it your story, and you want to sort of have the answer that you believe in already. And it was just a profound statement. And I think, we can all see that transparently today across, whether it's social media platforms, whether it's the traditional news or cable news, et cetera. And it's unfortunate, because there's nothing wrong with asking tough questions and being skeptical or constructive. And yet there's something that is undermining about being cynical and approaching life from a cynical standpoint.
Yeah, that story stuck with me. I mean, ever since you shared that with me, and I've been thinking about it, and because I think it's so poignant for the times that we're in right now, that it does appear that so many people want to ask questions, that the question they're asking isn't to seek to understand. It's not about asking good questions and being skeptical and trying to understand and learn and grow and connect to each other. The question is almost a gotcha question, whether that's a political question or certainly in all the discussions around the racial divide, politics, economics, climate change, whatever the issue is, it's asking that question out of trying to get you rather than trying to understand. And so language that I use with many teams and organizations and when I talk about thermostat cultures is that conversations are the currency for change. They're the currency for change. And yet We have to enter into those conversations. And this is, again, one of the reasons why I think right now organizations play an enormous role in our world today of helping people navigate all the things that they're thinking and feeling about in healthy and positive ways, and connect people rather than divide people. Our places of work have that opportunity to do that. But we've got to be able to have conversations that are the currency for change, where we're seeking to understand rather than seeking to just get you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, I was talking to a friend yesterday, actually, who runs a very large commercial real estate company. And the point that he was making to me was, for many people, the workplace is the most diverse environment that they ever enter.
No doubt.
And so we already had this division amongst us prior to the pandemic, but having work from home for many, many people has actually eliminated the opportunity to engage in those conversations in a diverse community. And that is a shame, because if that's where you get your diversity and your engagement, and that is missing, technology is great, but it doesn't replace the ability to be as authentic and open and understanding. So it's something we've got to work on.
Yeah, no, I can't tell you how many. I mean, I'd have to sit here and think about it, but how many conversations I've had in the last few months with different teams and organizations across industries. And yet some of the most valuable in the midst of work that we're doing to help develop their leadership thinking and also the culture of their organization and proactively shape that, I've created time and space just to step back and to ask and help them make sense of, how are you feeling about everything that's happening in the world, of being remote now, and about the economic uncertainty of your company and the organization, of Black Lives Matter and the civil unrest, of the pandemic, all of those things. And what you start to realize is that many of these people haven't had an outlet to really even make sense of their feelings, but then do it in a positive way where they're seeking to understand the diversity that is within their team and organization, and then say, where do we go from here? How do we actually breathe oxygen into each other so that we can move forward? And if those conversations aren't happening within our organizations, then oftentimes what I think is happening is people go back to then their circles of friends or communities or where they live that oftentimes just look and think and feel like them. And so that conversation is lost.
Totally. And I think that's the challenge as we move forward, right? How do we innovate, and how do we create the next normal, knowing that none of us actually know how long this period will last, right? And so we have an opportunity as an optimist, I think, to create what it looks like going forward. And that's sort of incumbent on any leader of any organization, of any community group, of any team, of any school. It doesn't matter what the entity is, but we have the chance to redefine what the next phase looks like. And that doesn't, I always say to people, different doesn't mean bad.
That's
different
right.
Can be better,
That's right.
And so shame on us if we don't take the opportunity to do things that have a huge impact going forward.
Yeah. And I love the fact that you use the word redefine. I've been using that a lot lately, as saying, in my opinion, I've been saying that the term leadership has been hijacked. We throw it around so loosely. And in fact, people in positions of leadership, that people are starting to think that that's what leadership looks like. And to be able to say, no, in our teams and organizations, we need to redefine what authentic leadership looks like in action and behavior, and get clear on, when we say the term leadership, what is it that we really mean? And the same thing, we need to redefine what is the culture of not just what we do, but how we do it, of how we operate as a team and as an organization. We got to redefine what we want that to be in the future, because if we can't articulate it, then we can't be surprised when it doesn't exist.
Yeah, absolutely. And going along those lines, one of the things I've noticed, and this is true with any crisis, I feel so fortunate to work with an amazing team of people.
Yeah.
And during a crisis, people emerge in new and interesting ways. And, that is fascinating to watch. People just step up and their creative juices flow. And for us, we talk a lot about expectations being totally different now, right? So you are freed up to think differently.
Yep.
You may have had sort of some historical norms or some things that sort of kept you in a box or kept you thinking a certain way. Well, now the world has changed. And so to watch that has been exciting and inspiring, and it just gives me more hope and optimism because I see people step up and say, we should do it differently. Let's do this. Let's try this. And it's like, yes, let's do that. And sometimes things reveal themselves in times of challenge.
Yeah. Crisis reveals leadership, and sometimes in not so good ways. And in other times we are so amazed and surprised. And I know that many of the organizations that I've been lucky to serve, to watch so admirably the way that leaders have kind of risen to the occasion is fantastic. So everybody right now is talking about, how do we innovate? How do we begin to redefine and create that future? And so all this conversation, but what is it we do, and how do I be a part of it and all that? Well, one of the ways, at least one of the innovative things that I know you and I are going to be voices in and try to do is my event that I've hosted the last few years, Thermostat Cultures Live, which in the past 3 years has been an in-person live event, an amazing event, intimate gathering of people that are in positions of leadership across industries, and talking about and inspiring each other to think about authentic leadership and what it looks like, and proactively shaping culture. Well, in the time and space that we're in this year, the opportunity is to do it virtually. And so on November 6th, 2020, which November 6th is going to be at a kind of interesting time in our nation for sure. But there are going to be some conversations that are the currency for change that are going to be needed. And so, Doug, you're going to join me as a part of that virtual event, and many other amazing voices are going to be a part of this conversation. But for anybody out there listening, let me just tell you that the purpose of this is I don't have all the answers, and nobody does, but to say, let's gather people together. And if this year it needs to be in a virtual space and reach as far as we can to breathe oxygen into each other, into to ourselves and to each other, to our team members, to our entire organizations, it's going to be an inspiring, action-oriented, but also solutions-focused kind of experience. So that's one example, I guess, that's out there that's coming up, that to say, all right, how do we gather people together? Let's have those conversations that are the currency for change. And then let's take it back to our teams, our organizations, and really begin to impact change right where we are. And maybe, just maybe, that will be a part of modeling for people too what civil conversation, civil discourse, and positive leadership can look like. So I'm super excited to have you joining in that, and your voice to be a part of that.
Yeah, I'm excited. Thanks for the opportunity. Look, I think the timing of the event couldn't be better in many respects, because we will be experiencing change.
Yeah.
Nobody knows what that'll be, but there'll be so much going on in that week specifically. And I do think this can be a model for not only making the time and space to have these conversations, but then for doing it in a period of time when many have said, oh, we're just going to cancel, or we're just going to sort of not do it. Well, we probably need it more than ever today. And I applaud you for figuring out a way to make it happen, and for curating a special conversation.
Well, we're going to figure out how to do it, and that's all I know to do is to reach out to people like you and other friends and voices that I know need to be a part of this, and just say we're doing it, and invite everybody to jump in and come be a part of it, and together we can be a part of conversations that are the currency for change. We can't snap our fingers and change the world. But what we can do is right where we are. I believe that the future of leadership and of the cultures that we are going to create wherever it is we are and with the people around us, that we have to redefine and clarify. And leadership is about connecting people and not dividing people. It's about positive solutions and not negative fear. It's about caring for all people and connecting that to action. So that's what we're going to try to do. And in order to stimulate progress, I know it's going to require courage. I know it's going to require deep breathing and oxygen. And then for all of us to take a step, just the next step. And so, again, I'm convinced that all teams and all cultures and all groups of people out there right now need leaders who are intentionally seeking solutions together and are supporting one another. So again, I'm excited about that day, and I'm really grateful that you're going to be a part of that and a voice to help.
Can't come soon enough. I'm excited.
Yeah, awesome. Well, hey, man, we're at our time. Again, thank you so much for taking the time to jump on, and hopefully everybody out there listening that this has been a good use of your time and contributed to your day. I hope, again, you'll rate and amplify and do all those things to help share this further out in the world. Thank you to you, Doug. I look forward to our next chat, my man.
Thanks for the opportunity. It's always a pleasure, and I always learn so much, so keep leading.
Thanks, buddy. Good to be with you. Everybody out there listening, again, stay tuned at Jason V. Barger on social media, jasonvbarger.com, thermostatcultureslive.com, all of those spaces, because more information's coming. And again, we're going to hopefully try to do our part to put good stuff out into the world. So thanks again for listening, and have a great day. Thank you for listening to today's podcast, and I hope the messages and questions stimulate positive change along your path. As always, if these messages resonate with you and add value to your life, I hope you'll help amplify them throughout the world. Please rate, comment, and share on whatever podcast or social media platform you're using. And share this podcast with the people in your life or work who should be part of these conversations. That way, this spirit does, in fact, spread. If these messages or developing leaders and culture would be helpful to your organization, or you have a question or comment about this podcast, please contact us at jasonvbarger.com. And remember, we all are ambassadors for the culture we want to create in our life and work. We have to own the vision we want to be a part of. The future of leadership is you, is me, is us. Be a thermostat.